All right, guys, so we get started. I want to say, Mr. Myers, class is in session. So today we're lighting up a story that goes from a nation locked in isolation to a global powerhouse. Strap in as we spark the fuse on the early years of World War II. So let's see what you remember. What does isolationism mean in U.S. foreign policy? Take a moment and answer that question now. Did you get it? If you did, good. It's avoiding involvement in foreign conflicts. So in 1939, Europe exploded into war, and while the world was rapidly descending into chaos, the US government, bolstered by a deep rooted isolationist sentiment, chose to stay on the sidelines. Now, they had just said no thanks to joining the League of Nations, but not everyone was happy with this decision. And oh boy, did that set the stage for some pretty big change. So let's see what you remember so far. Which of these best explains why the U.S. remained isolated at the outbreak of the war? Take a moment and answer that question now. Did you get it? Good. It was neutrality acts and public opinion. People just did not want to get involved in another war after World War I. So, by the way, have you ever heard of Charles Lindbergh? He was once a celebrated war hero and he later became a controversial champion of isolationism. And he had a real twist to his story. He was a real lone eagle with a twist. His views stirred up quite a debate in Washington. But in a change in the story, check this out. Back in 1944, our very own Charles Lindbergh stepped away from his famed transatlantic exploits and threw himself into the thick of action in the South Pacific. Not only did he rack up over 50 combat missions flying in P-38 Lightnings, but he rolled up his sleeves to help boost these fighters' range, fine-tuning their performance mid-air. So picture this. On July 28th, Lindbergh joined a squadron on an attack against a Japanese airfield near New Guinea. In the midst of a blazing dogfight with tracers streaking like lightning and his 20mm cannons roaring, he locked onto an enemy plane, closing in so fast that the battle became a high-speed dance of daring maneuvers. In a split second of intense focus and precision, his firepower found its mark, downing a Japanese aircraft and etching his name into the annals of wartime heroics. This wasn't just a mission, it was a bold statement that even a celebrated aviator like Lindbergh could reinvent himself in the face of global conflict. Imagine having a bona fide aviation legend leading your sortie into combat, but think about how he went from being a champion of isolationism to a fighting ace. So, as the war in Europe roared on, with the fall of France and the heroic stand in the Battle of Britain, the U.S. government began to feel pressure. While its isolationism was still the official tune, whispers of change filled corridors of power. Politicians, military leaders, even your average Joe started questioning, can we really stay out of this global mess? So let's see what you remember. How did early war events in Europe start to shift U.S. government thinking about isolationism? Briefly explain. Take a moment and answer that question now. So picture this, a smoky Washington, D.C. lounge where politicians argue like high-stakes poker players, each bet and bluff a cue or a clue that the U.S. might just be gearing up for a big change. Then came December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. In a single fateful day, everything changed. The U.S. was forced off the fence, the government, the people, everyone shifted gears as the nation mobilized for war. That attack just wasn't an act of aggression. It was a turning point that ended isolationism for good. From that moment, the U.S. embraced its role as a global power, setting the stage for its eventual leadership in NATO. And let me tell you, the ripple effects of that day still echo today. All right, here's the skinny on Pearl Harbor. Picture a calm, sunny December morning in Hawaii, the wind suddenly out of nowhere, Japanese launch an attack that shakes America to its core. In that fateful moment, one thing became crystal clear. Don't mess with America's boats. Just don't do it. It's like someone dared you to tangle with a powerhouse fleet armed with more spirit and firepower than you can shake a stick at. That day wasn't just a wake up call, it was a full on declaration that if you try to mess with our Navy, you're in for quite a storm of consequences. A tragic moment, sure, but also a reminder that America stands strong, ready to defend its waters and its freedom. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So let's talk about Admiral Yamamoto, a master strategist with a knack for drama. When he set in motion the Pearl Harbor attack, he might have thought he was pulling off the ultimate power play, but as fate would have it, his bold move did something he never intended. It awoke a sleeping giant. He said, and I'll quote him here, "I fear all we have done is waken a sleeping giant," and filled him with terrible resolve. He later went on and reflected, and oh boy, was he right. That giant stirred up a hurricane of American determination, transforming shock into a relentless drive for retribution. It's a stark, almost cinematic reminder. If you mess with America's boats, you're in for a world of hurt, and then some. So let's see what you remember. Which government action most clearly signaled the end of U.S. isolationism after Pearl Harbor? Take a moment and answer that question now. Did you get it? Good. It was declaring war on Japan. Let's try another one. All right, guys, as we wrap up this whirlwind tour of the early war years, remember that every bold government decision, every twist of fate helped us shape the nation's journey from isolation to global power. These were the very steps that paved the road to our leadership role in NATO. Keep that in mind as you debate, was it the right move? So, should the U.S. have moved from isolationism to global power? Use one piece of evidence from today's lecture to support your answer. So think about it, argue it, keep learning out there. It's an adventure. Have a great day, guys.